Welcome back. It's Swing Pass Wednesday, April 12th. We're just over 2 weeks away from the start of the 2023 season. So guess what? It's time to talk MVPs. That's right, most valuable players for the upcoming season. I'm joined as always by Daniel Cohen. Let's just get right into it. We've each got 3 selections for who we think can win MVP for the upcoming season. And as we were kind of talking about in the pre-show, I think my list is a little bit more aspirational, maybe like narrative driven, so to speak, whereas I think you, per usual, are going by the cold, hard facts of numbers, right? Who are the kind of production lords we expect to see from the upcoming season? So why don't you kind of start with your third most likely MVP candidate? I don't even know if I want to say like this is most likely because I'm ready for my list to maybe be wrong in a certain sense. Like, these players are fantastic, but you know, like there's just so many possibilities, I think, going into this new season. I think there's actually like 10 or so candidates that could really enter into this new season as potential MVP picks by the time the season is done.
For sure. I will start with, we'll call it my third most likely on my list of 3. And it is a guy that goes by the name of Jonathan Nethercutt of the Colorado Summit. Nutt was an MVP finalist last season. Really just what he brings to the Summit and the way he unlocks their deep game, both as a thrower, but also as like a threat of a thrower. Like, every time he touches the disc, defenses know that there is a shot that someone's going to cut deep. And that cut is probably going to draw 1 or 2 defenders back there. So I don't think there's any other thrower in the league right now that has quite the same gravity that Nethercutt brings to the field, even if he's not actually launching the discs. He led the league last year in hucks, but he only did at like I forgot what his rate was, something like 59% or so. Like, he was launching them. I think if he ups that efficiency level and he's completing even more this year, they've got a few new weapons on offense this year. Calvin Stoughton is expected to be a big impact rookie. So if you just have like more and more talent around Nethercutt, he is the engine of this offense. So I have little doubt that he is going to put up huge numbers this year. And I think Colorado, if they have gotten better as a team, which the offseason seems to reflect that they will, they have championship aspirations. So I don't know if it's going to take winning the championship for Nethercutt to have the most secure case for MVP. But if they can get to the finals, I think it's going to be a hard case against him.
I mean, you can never go wrong with Nutt, right? I mean, we've never seen a deep passer like him in this league. He's just singular in his ability to kind of be the machine at the center of a deep attack. Like you say, not only for his individual ability, but that suction he provides. You call it gravity. Sometimes I think of it as suction, the way that multiple defenders just kind of get drawn downfield when even his eyes go downfield. So I think that Nethercutt in year 2 in that Colorado system, with even more weapons on display, with even a full season of Alex Atkins, who is so good alongside him in the backfield at times last year, again, you can't go wrong with the 2017 MVP, and it wouldn't be surprising to see him still add to his hardware collection going into his prime. I've got somebody who was on the All AUDL last year. He wasn't an MVP finalist, but he did make that kind of quasi leap we were wondering about going into 2022, and that is the Austin Souls Kyle Henke. I just think he kind of put it all together last year. We've always known about his playmaking for years, ever since he was a rookie, right? But last year, he really elevated his performances in big games. He was so good against the Flyers in the playoffs. He just has that all-around package. He makes plays defensively off of the turn. They were putting him in on D-line rotations against the Flyers, and he was getting layout blocks in the open field. I mean, he's just getting to that level where he can do what needs to be done in a given bigger moment. It's not just kind of the sporadic chest-high layouts. You know, I'm thinking of the one against Chicago in Week 10 last year, the just phenomenal layout block that he got, but that was kind of in like a wishy-wash part of the game in the first quarter. Not much is happening yet. It felt like Henke last season more often than not was saving kind of his best plays for the biggest moments. Like, he had a huge sky in that week 6 win at home against the Flyers in the playoffs. Again, all of his big plays kind of came at very pivotal moments when the Soul were looking to climb back into the game. I just think he still has the capacity to continue to take it a notch higher. And I think that given Austin is set for maybe their biggest season yet, he looks like the leader of that team. And I just think that for someone like that in that given role, for a team that maybe hasn't reached their pinnacle yet, he just kind of feels like right place, right time. Like the production numbers are there, the way that he leads them into battle. I like the general chutzpah of it, right?
I remember that playoff game against Carolina. Like, I know they lost, but he was unstoppable, both offensively and defensively, and like he was doing everything he could to try to will them to a win. I was wondering about this. Do you think we don't put enough emphasis on defensive ability when it comes to MVPs? Because like of everyone we're about to talk about, Henke probably has the most ability to just slot in on a random D-line and get that layout block more so than any of these other candidates. So I don't know. Is that something that you feel like is maybe a flaw in our MVP voting thus far?
Do we discredit defense? I mean, yeah, as a league as a whole, I think we're still catching up on how to properly analyze and assess defensive players and their impact. I think much too often we look at blocks. Obviously, there is some precedent with that. Ben Yap had terrific block numbers in both of his MVP seasons. I'm thinking back to like Goose Helton and Bo Kittredge. They both had incredible block numbers in their respective MVP years. There's definitely a sense of like, if you can get takeaways, your value is there. But I even think your ability to play defense off of a turn, even if the block numbers aren't there, needs to start being elevated more in how we talk about O-line players. Because there's way too much value on somebody who can still bring it in coverage off of a turn, right? If you're not just giving up easy buckets in transition, so to speak. And I think you saw that from Austin last year. Not only were they decreasing their turnovers, it was tough as hell to score breaks on them, right? Like they were just an athletic bunch who got after it off of the turn. Henke was one. Evan Swiatek was another one. That dude's no fun to try and win a foot race against to go get a disc. And I think you're right. We undervalue that. We don't pay enough attention to what it really means for teams to stock up on these players who just excel off of the turn. They can bring it despite a mistake being made for their team. And I think you see that in some of the best teams. Another team that comes to mind, obviously, Carolina Flyers. They're just stacked with guys like that. Jacob Fairfax, he becomes a menace.
Fairfax is the pinnacle of it.
I would love a stat. I would love a stat if they had like block after a team's turn, or
getting the disc back
last year, like the get back or something. I feel like Fairfax had like that stat. 6 get backs last year, where he might have thrown the turn, but then within 5 throws in transition, he's just getting that disc back.
Right. Well, and Yacht used to do it all the time back in O-line Yacht version. And like James Pollard, I think, had his most blocks this past year despite switching to O-line. Yeah.
It's not always the best when an offensive player leads your team in blocks. The Flyers had it with Fairfax, Philly had it with Pollard, but both of them are playoff teams, so maybe it works out sometimes.
That's true.
We're doing a bit of a snake draft, so I'll submit my number 2 pick. And I think this is somebody who might qualify as somebody who we don't talk enough about their coverage ability off of the turn, as well as just their overall skill set. But I think we're really ready to see the true leap for DC Breeze's Johnny Malks. Now, this is a bit odd to say that considering he was already an all AUDL selection in 2021. He was a midseason MVP. If my memory serves correctly, was he unanimous too at the midseason point?
I mean, DC had like one of the best first half of their season that we've ever seen. I mean, I think they were undefeated. Yeah, he was lights out.
They had
first half, especially that game against Atlanta that he had. I feel like that was kind of the pinnacle of his 2021 performance. But yeah, he's a lot of fun.
And while his production went down slightly in 2022, just like an iota, I feel like his overall gamesmanship upped. He was making plays like layout blocks and transition. He was so much more active as a receiving threat. even if the numbers didn't quite dictate it, just his ability to kind of insist and put pressure on his individual matchups, I just feel continues to grow higher and higher. And if you read that article from Evan Lepler last week talking about DC kind of getting over the hump this year against New York, the Breeze's head coach, Daryl Stanley, said that Malks has just been kind of head and shoulders above the rest of the competition at practice. And I don't know. I'm buying into Malks Mania early this year. I think he's going to have a huge year. I don't know that necessarily his numbers will be as eye-popping as some of these other MVP finalists, given how deep DC's system goes, particularly on offense. But, I mean, Malks just has it, too. Like, you watch him, you see his confidence, you see the ease with which he plays. I don't know. I think he's kind of got a ceiling that doesn't really have a limit right now, and it's up to him to figure out how far he can push it, right?
He's a fair pick. I just, like you said, they go 14 deep on offense. And like the way they run their system really doesn't allow one guy to stand out so much against the rest. It's kind of like a Carolina problem. They have plenty of talent offensively, but it's just hard to pick one guy. And I do think if you had to pick one guy, it's probably Malks. I think he has the potential to be the best player on the Breeze this year. I just don't know if you like take him off an O-line if they really miss much of a beat, especially with Andrew Roy, Thomas Edmonds, some of their other new guys working in this year. Like, is there going to be such a significant like increase when he's on the field in their efficiency level?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we've talked about, though, with the kind of Breeze Empire rivalry is that for as good as these teams are and kind of like New York has this player, DC has this player, New York has this player, DC has this player, and you can kind of go down and almost like say they're eye to eye on paper these days. What the Empire have excelled at is getting guys who have that kind of killer quality at the end of games. Their ability to just close out in big moments, I think, speaks for itself for this New York franchise the past several seasons. It's Jack Williams, it's Ben Yah, it's also Jeff Babbitt, it's also Ryan Osgar, it's also like 3 other dudes. I think DC definitely has the talent, but I don't know yet if they have the kind of individual players who can just match those New York playmakers in the big game moments. And I think Malks is one of those guys. I think he's got that mojo. I think he's got that X factor. I think he's got that little bit of baller mentality, right? Like he's audacious with some of his throws and his plays. Like he'll pull hucks out that are frankly absurd, right? Like he'll just kind of be at a standstill and he'll just suddenly break his mark and unleash a missile 60 yards downfield. Like I think that kind of spontaneity, that aggressiveness that Malks has is going to be so vital in this series in 2023. So that's just kind of my thoughts on him. I totally agree with you. I think DC presents the problem of many where they just go so freaking deep. It's hard to really say like this individual makes this kind of significant difference, right? Like as opposed to a team like last year with Jordan Kerr in Salt Lake where he just has a usage number that's like 2x anyone else on the roster.
Right. I kind of compare it to like if we had given like Alan Laviolette MVP for the Flyers in 2021. Like it just probably wasn't going to happen because he is like generating so much of the deep dimension in particular on offense and like kind of does things differently than the rest of the O-line. It really is like a sum of its parts is greater than whatever that expression is. Greater than the whole. How does that go? Help me out.
Sum is greater than its parts.
Some is greater than, something like that.
There you go.
Anyway, we'll move on from Malks. I'll go with my second pick here is Jordan Kerr of the Salt Lake Shred. Obviously, MVP finalist. Huh?
I said it's not a bad pick. Not a bad pick.
It's really not. I mean, he was the MVP finalist last year. I think we gave him the runner-up to Ryan Osgar. They're just in similar spots, him and Osgar. There's a lot of comparisons between the two. Both are just like hyper aggressive at getting the disc into the end zone, and they do it at a very efficient rate. I think the pieces around Kerr this year with the additions of Lindsley, Eli Jaime, getting Will Selfridge back from injury, this O-line is going to level up as a whole. And I do think that's going to have a positive impact on everyone, but especially Kerr, who kind of like Nethercutt and kind of like Osgar, who I'll probably talk about later. Like they are kind of the engines behind everything. Like things don't really function well without them on the field because of the roles they play and just getting the disc into the end zone. And Kerr, I mean, he has been working out this offseason. He's still relatively young. I mean, I know he went to BYU, so we lose track of his age, but this is only going to be his third AUDL season. I think he's going to keep getting better. I mean, I know it's hard to improve on the numbers he hit last year. He had 90 assists and 20 some goals. Like he was playing at a ridiculous rate. I don't mean to say he's going to improve on the numbers, but I still think if Salt Lake can get to championship weekend, and it really might take that to really cement his case for MVP, kind of like what we were thinking last year. Because they lost to Colorado in the West Division Finals, it was harder to view him as a true MVP. But I do think they're going to have the talent this year to continue to push Colorado. And so I think a lot of it hinges on the team's success, but it's going to be because Jordan Kerr gets them there if they can reach it.
I agree with like 95% of what you're saying. I absolutely
talk about the 5% you don't.
I'll start with the 95 first, right? Like I think that the weapons around him will make Salt Lake even better than last year, even though they're one of the most top scoring offenses in the league. I think that he's still got room to grow individually, even after finishing as the MVP runner-up last year. I think that Salt Lake in general can still reach a new level. I just don't know if it's going to be specifically because of Jordan Kerr anymore. I think the presences of a Selfridge, a Jaime, and specifically like the two-time championship weekend MVP, Grant Lindsley, will sort of be what elevates that team to the next level. Also, not to mention, I think the coaching of Bryce Merrill. I think that's something that might have gotten stripped away from last season a little bit. We went into last season with so many questions about this shred roster, and that got answered almost immediately. And I think that's a huge testament to Merrill and his staff and what they've been doing out in Salt Lake. And I think, again, that they're just going to continue to evolve their systems and evolve what they're trying to do in year two as a franchise. And all of this is to say, again, that I don't think Jordan Kerr is going to get any worse. In fact, I think you're absolutely right. I think we're going to see a better Kerr. And I also think you're right. We might see a little bit of decrease in numbers. I just think that, and kind of what is necessary for this team is that he's going to have to share more of the load. He's going to have to offload what he did last year. He's going to have to basically make himself less valuable in like a visible way, right? Like I think we will know his value will increase if, say, they make it to championship weekend, but it might not be because of how he's throwing more assists, how he's getting more yards, how he's upping his completion rate or something like that. I think it'll just be in, hey, Grant Lindsley can take over now. It doesn't just need to be, you know, the Jordan Kerr show, or, you know, it's the evolution of other players on the roster as they get more familiar in their roles. I mean, Sean Cannell looked at times like he could be a deep thrower to power this offense himself. Like Luke Jorgensen looked really good as a rookie last year. These dudes are only going to get better. And so I think that the problem for me isn't like Jordan Kerr himself. It's that I kind of expect the general tide of the shred to go up a bit. Well, we'll see. We'll see what those defensive departures mean. We'll see what happens there. We'll see if maybe Lindsley plays on defense and Jordan Kerr remains in the same sort of king role on offense. Anyway,
I guess I don't see his role changing. So it's kind of like Osgar. Like obviously New York has tons of pieces around him, but it's because of the role Osgar plays in being the guy that is really driving the team downfield. Like that's basically Kerr's same role. So I just think it's a case where the talent around him is just going to kind of further put the emphasis on the guy who's like putting it all together. But I hear what you're saying. And I think the bigger obstacle to me is just the getting to championship weekend thing. Like it's going to be another hard case for Kerr for MVP if they can't get there, because and Colorado is just like such a giant right now in the West. It's a tall order to beat that team in the West Finals.
On paper, I think Colorado is right there with DC and New York. Like, I think we have less of a track
They could
record. We
be.
have less of a familiarity of how they do in adverse scenarios. And to be frank, Chicago beat them down in that semifinals game. I mean, the Summits.
It was kind of an embarrassing semis for Colorado.
Flat, and it was sort of like
Yeah.
a confirmation of, I think, the bias that a lot of us internally carry, which is that they play a different ball out there in the West. Like, something has happened
Different
the past
game.
several seasons where they get matched up against interdivisional foes, and there's a discrepancy forming. I think it's been since like 2017 when the then San Francisco won the whole dang thing that a West team has won a championship weekend. Correct me if I'm wrong, because LA lost in 2018.
No, that's right.
SD in 2019, 2021,
and
then
2021.
The past year Colorado lost. So there's just there's a little bit of a notion that the West is different, and I think this year the Summit disproved that, right? Like, I think that this is the most talented West team we've seen since the 2017 Flamethrowers.
It seems that way, for sure. And we do get a couple interdivisional games in the regular season for Colorado. They're playing Minnesota and New York.
That New York game, man.
Yeah, I mean, you can't script a regular season game better.
Yeah.
It's late. I know it's late. It's maybe like the second to last week.
I'm glad it's late. Both these teams deserve the kind of like added tension of their own expectations over the course of the season. I hope they're both also like saddled with a loss or two. Like, I want this to be a year where we come in with this notion of sort of the Elite Four, I think, of like Colorado, Carolina, New York, and DC, maybe Austin in there, and maybe Atlanta. But like, there's sort of this separation, and I want all that to come collapsing down. I want there to be total parity this year. I think we're close, but we'll see.
We'll see. And so the final MVP pick on my list, the favorite, and I think he's got to be considered the favorite for everyone at this point, has to be Ryan Osgar, making a repeat appearance on the MVP podium in 2023. There has never been a better offense in league history. Mm-hmm. And really, like, he is the one that has done it for this offense. Like, his efficiency last year directly correlated with the significant uptick in overall offensive efficiency for that team. He was hucking arguably just as much, completing like 20 of 21 or something ridiculous like that. He had
23. I think he was like
22 of 23 on the year.
I think he might have missed like another huck when in the second half of one of those championship weekend blowouts.
Right. And so like he is the main guy that is stretching the field and really getting the full utility out of guys like Jeff Babbitt and John Lithio, who are incredible deep cutters. It's not just like he's throwing it up to them deep. Like, everything is in rhythm. Everything is very timely. I think the part that kind of solidifies him as the favorite for me is what we saw down the stretch when DC put their guys on him like David Cranston and Jasper Tom and kind of like threw him off rhythm a little bit in those East Division finals. Excuse me. He basically like turns into a receiver, doesn't need to be the same aggressive thrower, and still looks like one of the more valuable players in that offense. And it was the same thing at championship weekend. Became the Jack Williams show in the backfield. That's fine, but then Osgar is just a downfield receiver, and honestly looked like one of the best downfield receivers in the entire league at championship weekend. Like, he is just that dynamic as both a cutter and thrower. I think he's probably the most dangerous offensive weapon in the league right now, playing on the best offensive team. To me, it's a pretty clear favorite in my mind for 2023 MVP.
I mean, look, best player, best team, that wins a lot of MVP arguments. And I think you're absolutely correct about Osgar. I'm actually writing a piece right now, and in it I'm talking about how he has a chance to become the third AUDL player ever to have 100 plus scores. That's assists and goals combined in 3 straight seasons. He will join Mark Burton and teammate Ben Yacht on that list, presumably. He's got 121 scores in each of his first 2 seasons in New York. It feels like a given. And there's a bunch of reports this offseason that he's leveled up. His training's gotten more intense. He's put on some muscle And so he might become an even more adversarial receiver for opponents to try and match up on, given that if there's one thing that you've been able to do against Osgar, given his technical proficiency and his quickness, was sort of move him off the ball physically a little bit. Might not be able to do that anymore. We'll see. Maybe the only thing that really lacks in his repertoire now is the layout. I think that's the one thing you can critique Ryan Osgar on, is his layout.
Okay, you say that, and I know Brandon Mattis likes to say that a lot. I saw him lay out
and just falling down more slowly.
He had like a pretty good layout save in, I think it was the game against Carolina that I caught on video. I'll slow it down for everyone and post it. But I think he's got it in him.
I feel like layouts, you really got to slow them down, and that's how people really appreciate them, right? Like if you're really trying to prove something on the borderline of if it's a layout or not, just go frame by frame. Like
we'll analyze his form. It's not just like a falling to the ground. I think he does leave his feet. He is airborne. Yeah.
No, I mean, how can you not pick against Ryan Osgar? I didn't put him on my list just to be a little bit contrarian, but to say Ryan Osgar is one of the 2 to 5 best players in the league at any given moment is to just be lying on yourself, right? Like that's who he's been. He's stupid productive in the system. It's built to emphasize his strengths. Everything works in concert around him, and you see the results. They're, like you say, the most efficient team ever, and they could be better this year. Like,
yeah, they probably will be.
Experiment with it. They didn't really hit their stride until the second half of the season when they pulled the 2-time reigning MVP Ben Yacht off of offense and just sort of said, "Hey, just be hyper efficient all over the place." Anyways, I think it's hard to pick against New York. I think I'm at the point in the offseason and with so few days left before opening pull of the new one that I'm just in contrarian mode. I've had too long to digest how good New York is. And so I'm like trying to look for any reason to not just say, yeah, they're going to go undefeated and produce another MVP for the 4th straight year. But
take us home. Who's your favorite right now?
Well, it's not a New York Empire player because, again, I'm in contrarian mode. Although I probably should have an Empire player on here. I'm going to go with the biggest move of the offseason, the dude who is the central part of Chicago's success the past several seasons. Of course, I'm talking about Pavel Yanis on his new team, the Los Angeles Aviators. I think if the Aviators do come back to prominence this year, it will be because of all of their new additions. I think we've gone over this, that the offseason that the Aviators had obviously started with Pavel's addition, but the both caliber and sort of need fit pieces that they have put on the roster, I think puts the Aviators in a position to be their most successful selves since 2018. But with all of that, giant butt, it's still going to be because of Pavel if they do anything, right? Like that dude has just got that chip. I mean, did you listen to his podcast interview with the Colorado boys from like
I saw some clips. I
mean, for as coherent as he sounds all of the time, just the general scope of it and sort of his ego-driven persistence, it's just like it's all to say, it reminds me that he's one of those people, for as much as you want to maybe take points here off for how he rubs you or the way he goes about it, he hates failure so much and he's so good at process and discipline and execution that it simply doesn't really stick around him for long. And while the Aviators did win just 4 games last year and they were this close to losing their final 6 games of the season, this LA team has all the mojo in the world, and they have all of this confidence just kind of out of the sky, this offseason. And that starts and ends with this Pavel dude, right? Like, he's just been about it, and he's backed it up. Like, I think there was that sense in 2021 when Chicago added all that talent, and he was doing that Chad stuff. What was his alt ego?
It's like a weird fever dreamy.
Yeah, I called him Paul Jones, tried to like Americanize the Polishness or something. But yeah, he did that whole like bro thing on Twitter where he was like trying to be funny, but also like commenting on stuff. And like for as much as you wanted
a weird
to kind of,
guy.
like not appreciated, it's like they kept winning. It kept being funnier. It kept being relatable in a way to the league storyline. The few people can. I don't know. It's just he's like Hellraiser in a certain way, man. Like you close your eyes and it's just Pavel still talking about himself up there, right? Like it's just Nightmare on Elm Street. Like you go into a deeper dream and it's just Pavel still running resets and doing the same stuff every time. Like he's out on the West Coast and you just know it's going to look like the Union at times. Like they're going to get within red zone and it's going to be him bullying people up line.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Like it's like in the same way that New York has a certain inevitability, it feels like Pavel in the West does too. For as good as Colorado is and for as good as I expect the Summit to be, Aviators are going to be right there with him. He's going to be that thorn in their side.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, the thing is we haven't seen it yet, so we still don't really know exactly how it's going to look. But I generally agree with you. I am curious, though. What do you think? I mean, we talk about like how team success does matter for the MVP and like almost exceeding expectations when it comes to like, I mean, like New York kind of has to win a championship. It feels like for them to have an MVP.
Has to.
Yeah,
I think they have.
DC has to get past New York for them to have an MVP considered. Colorado, I would say, kind of has to get to the finals. Salt Lake has to get championship weekend. Whatever. What does LA have to do in your mind? Like, how far does Pavel have to lead them to be a legit consideration for MVP? Does it have to be champ weekend?
I don't know. I mean, so the last three have been New York. Or from New York. The last three MVPs have all been from New York's roster. Obviously, the Empire have qualified for 3 straight championships weekends. They've been in 3 straight title games. Excuse me. So the precedence has been championship weekend appearance. But thinking back, the 3 MVPs immediately prior to that were in reverse order. Rowan didn't make championship weekend in 2018. Nutt didn't make championship weekend in 2017. And Dylan Tunnell didn't make championship weekend in 2016. So it's there. And I think we could return to it. And so I'm all setting this up to say, like, I do think there is a world where LA makes it to the West Division finale and loses to Colorado. And we still say Pavel's the MVP, you know, like I don't know exactly what that looks like, given that I don't know that the Aviators, as I see them right now, need Pavel to be the kind of like NASA grade level numbers production superstar that he's been. I think they need his presence, but I don't know if they need like 80 plus assists like he's been putting up with for Chicago for several seasons.
Yeah.
All of this is to say, I don't know exactly what that looks like, but I think that there is a reality that exists where LA makes West Division championship, they lose, and Pavel still comes out MVP.
Yeah, well, and it kind of depends on what happens in the other divisions too. Like if DC makes it over New York, but like it's not clear that Malks would be the clear-cut MVP, or if Carolina makes it and they don't have a clear-cut MVP candidate, like it's still going to hinge on the success of other teams as well. So TBD. But yeah, I'm kind of curious, like what would be enough for Pavel to do in his first season with LA?
I think like we should look like we should get like the general prototype imprint of what has been the AUDL MVP. Like what is the average? Assist, goals, blocks, completion.
It's a lot of scoring.
Well, it's gonna be wacky. I almost think it should be split around like 2017 or something because
the new era.
MVPs, no offense to Goose or Bo, but it was definitely kind of like just the raw
different game
of everything
back then. Yeah.
There wasn't quite as much of an appreciation for offensive precision, let's say, in the first few years of the league, right? Like,
yeah, part of me wishes I lived through that time just to see the significant growth that the league has undergone.
Yeah, it was wacky, but I'm glad to be where we are now. You know, it's good to be in the present, and we hope you are with us too. As again, we're now 16 days away from opening poll on April 28th. Yeah. Friday, April 28th. You can tune in at watch.audl.tv. We'll continue to roll out more and more preseason preview content for you But that'll be it for this episode of Swing Pass. You can join us right back here next Wednesday. We'll see you soon. Bye.